Okay, so we should be live at this point, which is fantastic. So I'm going to give it a second for anybody that may want to log on to take a look. So we're going to do our Monday Aftermath show. Monday's Aftermath is basically a recap of last week. What happened, what's going on in the world of real estate, what's going on in our world, what's going on in the area in which you live. And so we're going to kind of cover some of those basics. Take a look at what's happening in the community, what you can look forward to in the upcoming week, as well as keeping you up to speed on what's happening in the real estate economic world. That's an important thing to make sure that we take some time to actually go over, is to say what's going on in the real estate world. So a couple things. One, the boring part of real estate that if you're a consumer, a buyer, or a seller, and you may not care about a whole lot, or at least it's boring. You might really care about it, but and just not the most entertaining thing is the data. And one of the things we do is we have a third-party statistician that creates a whole data package for us at the end of each quarter. I think they do it more frequently than that, but we get it each quarter. We call it Trend Talk. And so I actually am going to be presenting Trend Talk to the real estate agents tomorrow morning. And so I'm going to give you guys a brief preview of it because, well, frankly, I have access to it and this is my show and I can do whatever I want. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of that information as well. We're also going to do just our week update to say, how are things moving on a micro level here in Cherokee County? And then we're going to cover some news. We'll talk a little bit about the Fed, where they currently sit. We were promised 3 to 4 rate cuts this year. Everybody's dying and waiting. We'll talk about the CPI numbers that came out not last week, maybe the week before, and how that seems to have affected the Fed's feelings on things, and go from there. So that's what we're going to cover today, as well as some of the entertainment stuff that happens in our county, most expressly the segment that we do on Music Scene. Why do we bother with what's going on in the music scene on Real Estate Channel as well? Because I like music. So we love this community. There is a ton of live music that you can experience. As many of you know, we have a band that plays live throughout the county and other places around adjacent to Cherokee County. And we'll talk a little bit about those things in case you were thinking about getting out and having a good time locally without having to, go inside the perimeter, in case you haven't been inoculated to do so. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rolling. Here we are. All right, so we're gonna start with the market update first. So let me get out my notes here and take a look at what we got. So market update first. One thing is I try to look at the segmentation from week to week. So currently, this as of right now, this Monday morning on April 22nd, 2024, we have 647 active listings in the detached market. Now, this doesn't include condos and townhomes and such, but 647 gives you a good picture because that's going to be the majority. We have 21 in a coming soon status. So that means they've signed listing agreements. It's been listed in the MLS, notifying us that it's coming soon, somewhere in a 14-day window. We're not exactly sure. If I take a look at what happened in the last 7 days, I can see that we have new listings, 108 new listings this week alone. Now that starting to feel like a lot. We're starting to see the beginning of that spring market and what's happening with the spring market. So that's interesting. But let's compare it against the under contracts and close. In the last week, as far as the FMLS is concerned, 47 transactions closed out. So about half of what went live. And 41 others are now under contract. And that would be new under contracts that happened in the last 7 days. That doesn't mean there's only 41 under contract. There's more, but in the last 7 days, there's 41. So that kind of gives you the glimpse at just a small view of what's happening there in Cherokee County. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the chairman, the Fed chairman, and what's happening with that, because interest rates is a hot topic. Everybody wants to know, what's going to happen with interest rates. Are they going to go ahead and lower those this year? Now, they're not saying that they're not going to, but you might want to read between the lines just a little bit. So we originally were going to go with 3, maybe 4 when it was the end of last year, due to how the higher interest rates had affected the economy. The CPI numbers, if you don't know what they are, they're what's known as the Consumer Price Index. So they're looking at the cost of goods and everything else, trying to quell inflation. The way that they do that is they make interest or money, I should say, more expensive so that people buy less stuff, causing a cooling effect. If there's less demand, then stuff doesn't get so expensive. If you ever saw that small reel that was done about a California buyer who was going to buy a property here in Georgia, but they did it as an apple. Like, I have this apple for sale, and they go through this whole bit about bidding on an apple, which was kind of a funny play on like 2020, 2021, and maybe even to 22. At some point, I'll find that and we'll actually just kind of play it on the channel. But if you saw that, it's all about that, trying to make sure that if there are 50 buyers for one apple, then that apple gets way more expensive because somebody's going to outbid somebody else because there's only one apple to go amongst the people. If you get down to 50 apples for one person, there's a lot of choice. Apples get cheaper because they're going to rot. And, you know, even though real estate is not fruit, same difference, right? Supply and demand 101. That's what we're going to, that's where the real numbers are at. So those CPI numbers came in a little hotter than what they expected. The Fed has really been targeting an arbitrary number, 2% on inflation. I think it's sitting closer to 3 to 4s. They may adjust that target, but as of April 22nd, they have not done any rate cuts as far as the Fed fund rate. It doesn't look like they will be considering anything till June or maybe later, as far as that goes. So that pushes it out. Some are speculating that it may not happen at all. We may end up going the entire time and not actually have a rate cut at all, which is entirely possible. So just look at those things, but we are going into an election year, so stuff is going to get a little weird. I would anticipate that rate cuts will probably come at the end of third quarter, beginning of fourth is my thoughts on it. But there's a lot of economic factors and political factors that will kind of bleed into that. Okay, so that covers those two segments. So now we're going to go into an update. So this will be the legal section update that we want to cover right now. Okay, so one of the things that you may or may not be aware of is Supreme Court rulings. Obviously, in recent years, the Supreme Court has been kind of more in a highlighted position where you're seeing a lot more stuff with them and their decisions. Now, obviously, what happens is laws get put on the books, cases go before courts, lower courts as they call them, within a state until they hit a certain level. And once they hit a certain level there, they go into a federal jurisdiction. And the highest court in the land that you can bring something to is the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court rules on stuff, there's really nobody else to appeal it to. And it's always going to be like a split decision. So like a 0-9 decision or a 5-4 decision, something like that. And I believe majority wins. So one of the things that actually happened, I want to bring it up on my screen here, but it is, let me see if I can find it. A Supreme Court ruling about property rights happened. And there's some interesting implications on what this may or may not mean. So let's take a look. Okay, so what this states in here is a California homeowner, George Sheets, spelled with a Z, won a victory at the Supreme Court on Friday in his challenge to the constitutionality of a fee that was being required to pay the county to receive a permit to build his home. I know that sounds boring, but stick with me. In a unanimous decision authored by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, the justice agreed with Sheets that conditions on building permits should be subject to heightened scrutiny, even if they were authorized by legislation rather than imposed on an individual basis by administrators. So I'm going to kind of cut back and we're going to talk about this for a second. Okay, you can read that article. It is on Scout Us blog. I'm sure you can find it if you just search it. There's actually some good YouTube videos where they'll explain it. But basically, this is what happened. A guy in California has a patch of land. He wanted to retire to that land, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So he was going to go build, I think he was in the construction industry. So he was going to put a mobile home on there because going through all the regulations to get building permits and these things is a little more complicated in California. We'll just let that sit for a minute. But manufactured homes or mobile homes, obviously, if they're available to be purchased in California, they've already gone through the government scrutiny to meet certain standards. So now all you're talking about is, if necessary, septic, well, depending on whether there's water and all that, and set up and putting it in place. So there's a lot less stuff to have to go through this. So this particular gentleman decided that's how he'd retire because he didn't want to go through as many hoops because he had spent many years in that industry doing that kind of stuff. So in doing so, he went to apply for his permit and they charged him somewhere in the vicinity of, I want to say $26,000. I could be wrong on the number. You can fact check it. I don't think it's relevant to the conversation. That $26,000 fee was for road disturbances, meaning, well, now they're doing construction. That means there's going to be vehicles on the road. This is going to deteriorate the road. So they need to have this money to put in the kitty to be able to further develop the roads in the future because now you're improving land and such. Now, many people probably feel that the government shouldn't do this kind of stuff anyway, but we see these kind of impact fees or local municipalities that charge fees in some cases to help fund infrastructure, and in other cases to deter people from doing too much of something, making it a harder barrier to entry. You know, let's just say the fence is higher and you got to climb higher to get over it, so less people will do it. So how does that affect us? Well, that's an interesting question. So where this, I think, might come into some relevance is we're seeing in the North Georgia mountains and even, you know, down here in the Cherokee County about STRs, short-term rentals. There's a lot of communities that are trying to restrict homeowners' rights and what they can use their property for. Now, there's a myriad of reasons for this. One of them is because of noise ordinances. For example, if you have a high rise in Atlanta and you're renting that out every time there's a baseball game, and then you get frat guys in a party in there, the neighbors who are living there, it's ruining their quiet enjoyment. So the municipality tries to step in and make rules because what happens is if you buy one, you might do a better job of regulating the people in there because you care and you live in Atlanta. But if you have one and it's profitable, then let's just say 50 people from all over the world that don't live here all buy one too. And now the thing gets out of hand. There's really nobody to hold accountable. So they just start trying to fine, regulate, and fee it to death to be able to, slow the roll, let's say. So specifically, let's talk about some of the stuff that's happened maybe in Union County. So like the Blairsville area and what is now bleeding down into Blue Ridge. And even Gilmer counties where they're working on the same things. So it's argued that the infrastructure up there was never meant to handle the kind of tourist traffic that it gets. Now, I'm not an expert in this. I can't say, about the road usage and the taxes on those things. A majority of those cabins and houses, which I own several up in that area, have septic systems. Some of the complaints I hear is you get out-of-state investors that own a property that do minimal maintenance. And so you'll get guest after guest after guest after guest into these properties. And in some cases, they'll put more people in there than the property should hold, and they won't maintenance the septic system. So you have issues with it leaching, out of the ground and having problems because of improper maintenance. So as a result, they want to come in and put in restrictions. They want to add fees. For example, I believe like if you wanted a short-term rental, if you were even approved in the city of Ellijay, like in the city limits around that downtown area, it's like $1,000 fee for a permit. If you were to do this in Louisville, Kentucky, I believe it's like $2,500 to maybe get approved. Like you have to pay the fee. It has to follow a bunch of rules. Then it has to go before a council. And even if it meets all the rules, I'm getting reports from professionals in the area that you meet all the rules, you paid the fee, you are a professional, everything's done right, and they'll still say no because they just don't want it. And that brings up these type of issues. So the fees that they're charging and the restrictions that they're placing, this is one of the first cases Granted, I have not researched this a bunch, but it's one of the first cases where you can see the Supreme Court saying it's unconstitutional for them to do this if they can't directly correlate it to a stressor or an actual cost that the municipality would have in regards to it. For example, this guy having a piece of property out in the middle of nowhere, throwing a trailer on the home, and him and his retired wife driving out there isn't going to have a $26,000 impact on the roadways and construction in the area. I mean, that's kind of arguable. So that's the reason he actually paid the fee. I think this started in 2016, so not easy to win this, but finally got up to the higher courts and got ruled on in a landslide victory, 9-0. They said it's unconstitutional, and now the county has to basically pay him the fee back because it's not commensurate. So the argument is, if this creates more lawsuits based on this Supreme Court ruling, how will this affect local municipalities from restricting uses or charging undue fees for it taxing the system? And how do they prove that the fees that they're charging are being put into the direct cause and not being put into something else? Right? That was part of the thing, is this $26,000 that they were charging in California would be allocated to an unrelated community or county expense. And so that argument kind of exists, right? There's a lot of problems with this. Do I think this automatically creates a way out? No, but the idea falls under this, and we'll go back to the screen. I'll show you real quick. Okay, so it says Sheets argued that the fee violated the Fifth Amendment. It's called the Takings Clause, which bars the government from taking private property for public use without just compensation. He told the state court that to determine whether the fee passes the constitutional muster, they should apply the test outlined in the Supreme Court in two property rights cases, Nolan versus California Coastal Commission and Dolan versus the city of Tigard, Oregon. Those cases taken together hold that if the government wants to require someone to give up property in exchange for a land use permit, it must show that such a condition is closely related and roughly proportionate to the effects of the proposed land use. In Sheets' case, it's 24 grand. There it is. He argued that they meant that the county was required to make a case-by-case determination that the $24,000 fee was necessary to offset impact of congestion attributable to this project. Now, if you're a legal expert, which I'm not, you're going to say, them imposing restrictions has nothing to do with this because the constitutional right was about seizure, so fees. But if you are in the short-term rental game, you're going to see in areas what they're doing is they're trying to fee their way to the point where it's just not affordable. The restrictions part of it, I think, has more to do with quiet enjoyment. But so far there is no case law on it. Something to watch, something I wanted to point out, and that's that dead horse. We're going to stop beating it. So let's go ahead and move on down the line. All right, so that was the Supreme Court ruling. All right, so what else did you miss this week when it comes to what's going on locally? So we'll call this the segment. This is my my rock and roll segment to this. So one of the things that you missed was, if you are a music lover, is a bunch of live music. So I'm going to show you what's coming up this week. So this is not a missed portion, but just what is on the docket. So let's go in and look at this real quick. So you can see under related items through Facebook. I'm old, so I use Facebook a lot. We've got an ABBA tribute band. This is the 9:55 show. This will be at Mad Life in downtown Woodstock. I believe they also have the 7:30 show for the same date. I don't know why they're separated on here. One of the things that you really may want to check out is the Upriver Festival. So the Upriver Festival is a festival that is I think it's the primary fundraising component they use for Goshen Valley Boys Ranch, which is here in Cherokee County. If you don't know about Goshen Valley, I definitely encourage you to look it up. It's something that our Keller Williams office has been involved with over the years. I'm a Rotarian and the Town Lake Rotary, and They do a lot with them. We prepare the Thanksgiving meal for all the boys that live at the ranch and the host homes. It's an unbelievable organization. The last several years, our band Bent to Fly has actually been the headlining player at that particular festival. This year, All Talk, I'll put it back up on the screen. All Talk, which is an 80s, 90s, and 2000 pop and alt rock band, will be performing, and hopefully the weather's nice. This is going to be on the Mill at the Etowah. It's a huge stage. The bass player and the drummer are actually the bass player and drummer from our band. The bass player's wife, Pam, has fronts this band, and it's more of an alt rock band. Phenomenal setup out there. Highly encourage you to go see that. If those don't hit your musical bone, we've got First Friday in Canton on A1A. They got the Jimmy Buffett Tribute Band, and then it looks like A1A Jimmy Buffett Tribute Band is going to be at Mad Life Saturday, the late show as well. Okay, so if you happen to be somebody who spends a lot of time with music here in Cherokee County, I'm going to encourage you to look up Cherokee County Music Scene. What's next? This is where you can find out what music shows are coming up in Cherokee County. This is a page that's run by my wife, and you'll see that there's just a bunch of different stuff on here that you can go and see. These are upcoming events, from the patio music that's at Mad Life to some shows that are also going to be at Mad Life, like Scarlet 8 Goth Rock. Rootstock, one of the restaurants, is having Spencer Smith there. Banks and Shane, the Atlanta Entertainment Tradition. There's just a lot of different stuff, and you can always click see more and look at what's coming up, including the ABBA Tribute Band and all that. That being said, I'm also going to hit on this one thing, and this is, if you missed out, now I know this is not Cherokee County, this is Cartersville, but my band, Bent to Fly, played the Cartersville Barbecue and Brews, and you can see some of the pictures here. They got one of me playing to a train, apparently. So that's fun. And then tuning. There was a lot of pictures where I guess Jay's setting up too. This was actually during the setup. This is where we were aligning the stage for everything. But we got to play in what a train was actually going through, which is kind of weird. That is loud, so mute. All right. So you guys can see right here in this clip, like we started the set and here comes a huge train behind us. Believe it or not, we were louder than the train. So that was awesome. There was a lot of people here. It was a great fun show. And that's what you missed this week. All right. That being said, we're going to go into the last section of the live broadcast. And that is going to be, we're going to give you a preview of the first quarter slides, taking a look at the real estate market so that you're informed. I'm only going to cover about 3 or 4 slides, kind of give you a 10,000 foot view. All righty, let's take a look. Okay, so this is first quarter 2024, which has been, from a unit standpoint, a pretty dismal quarter. One of the things everybody's always asking is when the prices are going to come down. Interest rates being high should make prices come down, but supply and demand is everything. So at the peak of the buyer's market in January of 2009, the active listings were at 31,121 in the metro Atlanta area. So that covers like 10 to 15 counties. I don't know the actual number. That's why I'm giving you a wide range. As you can see, a normal market, which was 2019 pre-pandemic, which was still a seller's market, was around 12,000. We're currently sitting at 7,000. So we still have low inventory going on. 2.6 months worth of inventory is definitely below. 6 months is the balancing act. The numbers of solds, when you had 31,000, was 1,800 transactions. That's scary. Here at 12,000, you get 4,700 solds. And notice here, now that we're down to 7,000, we're getting 3,300. This is a higher percentage of this number than this is of this, but you can see that there's compression there. Also, you're going to see the price jump from here to here, which is the other pressure issue. We're also seeing days on market starting to climb, 26. If you were to look at this in 2021, those were probably in the 10 or less, maybe in the single digits in some cases. So failed listing percentages are kind of holding, so 30% of everything that goes on the market doesn't sell. And that's likely because somebody was like, let me put this up. And like, well, what do you think I should ask? Well, it's probably worth 400. Well, can we ask for $1 million? Well, sure. You could if you wanted to, but nobody's going to pay it. Well, let's just try one of those. All right. So the median list to sales price is actually higher. So this tells you on the median stances, if people are asking $100,000, then they're on average of getting 97,200. Here it's 98. So we're actually there's less negotiation. Very interesting. Let me scroll through a couple of these. So the number of solds, this is broken down by price points. Under 200 grand, mostly because they don't exist. 200 to 300 grand, you can see we had 1,200 units first quarter of last year, 1,000. So we're getting less units going. Here we actually had a little bit of a spike from 300 to 500 and then 500 to 750. And that's because some of these, I think, fell into this bucket because of price increases. And then, you're just looking overall, it's less from first quarter to first quarter comparison. Here's the change in the number of solds. So this is based on percentages. So gives you a nice good look at 2020. It was like we were up 8. This is where life was normal. Here is when we went full swing and there was a drop in 18 because nobody knew what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden this climb was boom, boom. And, we got in the first quarter of 21. It was like this stall out and then just a slamming amount of units as we went into here. And then we started getting drop-offs based off of compared to these. And it kind of rolled down here. The number of units sold really dropped off. And here's where you can feel the compression happening was in third and fourth quarter of 22. And then is when we started hitting. And then the price where stuff was sitting longer, you really felt it around here. These were pretty strong. It was pretty strong this year. And this year, here is when it started to get softer overall. Here is the supply comparison. You want to know where the buyer's market is? Well, if you're in the market for $1.5 million or higher, that indicates that it's a buyer's market. So if you look at the previous period, it was 8.4 months worth of supply. Currently, it's at 9. Here's the balanced market. Here's the seller's market. This is the buyer's market. So you're way under on these. Now, million to 1.5 million's getting there. We're at 4. 6 is balanced, 7 is buyers, right? All the rest of this is still pretty compressed as you roll into that. Now, here's the last slide I'm going to share with you. Percentage of original list price to what they actually sold for. So this is where they started. So this doesn't include price reduction. So for example, if somebody starts at 1.5 million and then they lower to $1 million and they get full asking price at $1 million, this would reflect off the $1.5 million price point. So in other words, it would say that we were less than the original. It would not count it as 100%. So when you look here in these price points, there's more price reductions here. People are getting better deals here, but nowhere else. Everywhere else are the sellers getting more of their asking price. Here was 94, which means there was 6% negotiation down. Here it's 95. This was 96. Now it's 98. This was 97. Now it's 98.4. And you can see on we go. It's basically up. And so that's kind of what I want to tell you is the way it's currently trending with interest rates sitting markedly at 7.25 to 7.5% on the high end and in the high 6s on the low end. You're basically still seeing people getting closer to their asking price, lower inventory, appreciation is still climbing, probably more than it should. I don't know. But that's the overall look at everything. So when it comes down to it, it looks like we're going to have fewer units, less transactions, but prices will likely hold through 2024, or at least that's what first quarter is indicating. The bulk of transactions will happen in second and third quarter. And so let's see what's going on as we continue to watch the market. Like I said, we had 108 new listings this week put on in Cherokee County. So I hope this information has been helpful to you. I appreciate you guys very much, and we will talk to you soon.